Asterix in Britain. It was the year 50 BC. After a long struggle, the people of ancient Gaul, the country we now know as France, had been defeated by Julius Caesar, the famous Roman conqueror, and his mighty army of legionaries. Chiefs like the brave Gaulish leader Vercingetorix had to lay their arms at Caesar's feet. The Romans had conquered all Gaul. Well, almost all Gaul. For there was just one small village of indomitable Gaulish rebels left in the province of Armorica, now known as Brittany. The people of this village still held out against the invaders, making life very difficult for the Roman legionaries garrisoning the fortified camps of Totorum, Aquarium, Laudanum, and Compendium. The village chieftain, Vital Statistics, was majestic, brave, and hot-tempered, respected by his men, and feared by his enemies. Vital Statistics himself feared only one thing. He was afraid the sky might fall on his head tomorrow. But, as he used to say, tomorrow never comes. So he managed to keep cheerful, particularly after an invigorating punch-up with a few Roman soldiers. Thumping Romans, in fact, was a popular sport among the Gauls. The very best fighter in the village was the shrewd, cunning little warrior Asterix. All perilous missions were immediately entrusted to him, and when he was fighting Romans, he always took his best friend Obelix along. Obelix made his living by carving and delivering menhirs, the huge standing stones which can still be seen in Brittany today. There was a lot of demand for menhirs in ancient Gaul, and Obelix was just the man to make them, being immensely big and immensely strong, though the least bit touchy about his size. Not that he was really fat, as he often pointed out, only well covered. He had tried training his faithful hound Dogmatix to carry menhirs too, but Dogmatix, a rather small black-and-white dog with floppy ears, wasn't quite up to it. However, Obelix was very fond of him. Something else of which he was very fond was roast wild boar, the favourite food of the Gauls. Another Gaul who had a voice in village affairs was the bard Cacophonix. Unfortunately, his voice was not a very good one, a drawback for a bard, whose job it was to sing and play the lyre. Cacophonix's lyre-playing was as frightful as his voice. So long as he didn't play or sing, everyone liked him. But the victory ode he tried to perform at the banquet, held after every successful anti-Roman expedition, would have blighted the whole celebration, if the other Gauls hadn't hit on the clever idea of making sure Cacophonix was safely bound and gagged before any banquet began. One ancient Gaul, who was ancient even at the time of this story, was the venerable village druid Getafix. He used to gather mistletoe with his golden sickle and brew magic potions. Getafix knew a number of excellent recipes, handed down over the years from druid to druid by word of mouth. His real speciality, however, was a magic potion which gave anyone who drank it superhuman strength, though only for a limited period of time. After that, the effects wore off. All the same, the potion came in extremely useful for helping the Gaulish villagers to hold out against the Roman legions. The only villager who never needed any was Obelix. That was because he had fallen into a cauldron full of the stuff when he was a baby, and it had a permanent effect on him. As the magic potion tasted rather good, and usually had lobster in it to improve the flavour, Obelix thought it wasn't fair that he couldn't have a dose of it too, like everyone else in the village when danger threatened, and he was always trying to persuade the druid to give him some. What with the magic potion doled out by Getafix whenever the Romans attacked, and of course the Gauls' own native wit and courage, the legionaries in the fortified Roman camps near the Gaulish village were getting absolutely nowhere with their attempts to carry out Caesar's orders and defeat the indomitable villagers. Fresh garrisons kept coming out from Rome, armour nicely polished, full of fight, confident that they would flatten a pathetic bunch of Gaulish barbarians in no time, and so earn their imperial master's undying gratitude. Exhausted garrisons kept going back to Rome, armour and confidence both badly dented by the pathetic bunch of Gaulish barbarians, and dismally aware that their imperial master was not going to be pleased. Caesar wasn't giving up hope of conquering all Gaul, not by any means. However, there were a few other bits of the world he hadn't conquered yet either, so he decided, for the time being, to turn his attention to them. Our story, therefore, does not actually begin in ancient Gaul. It begins at sea, one fine day when a pirate ship with a fierce dragon figurehead, flying the skull and crossbones, was sailing cautiously along the Mare Britannicum. This was the bit of sea separating Gaul and Britain, which we now call the English Channel. The pirate captain was up on deck with one of his crew, an old pirate with a wooden pegged leg. "Right," said the pirate captain, rubbing his hands with glee. "Well, we finally managed to save up enough money to buy this nice new ship of ours. But watch out. Mind you steer well clear of any Gauls. They've sunk quite enough ships of ours already." The lookout man, on watch in the crow's nest at the top of the mainmast, suddenly let out a yell. "Ship to port, Captain!" "Not Gauls, are they, by Tutatis?" asked the pirate captain, swearing by the chief god of the ancient Gauls, so as to be on the safe side. "No, Roman ship to port, by Jupiter!" the lookout shouted back down, swearing by the chief god of the ancient Romans, so as to be on the safe side too. "Roman ship to port! Ah, that's a good portent," said the pirate captain, chuckling in a sinister way at his own horrible joke. Captain, there's more than one Roman ship to port. There's a whole enormous great Roman fleet to port," added the lookout man, in alarm, as Roman galley after Roman galley hove majestically into sight, huge sails billowing, great banks of oars dipping rhythmically into the waves, troop upon troop of Roman legionaries, all armed to the teeth, drawn up on deck. Even the pirate captain had to admit that while it was unlikely to be carrying any Gauls, this vast Roman fleet was more than he had bargained for. "We must flee, and fast," he told his men. "Come on, be fleet about it." But it was too late. Next moment the whole Roman fleet full of armed men swept down on the pirates' brand-new ship, smashing it to pieces, and passed on without even noticing what it had done. "A hit-and-run fleet," said the lookout man, shaking his fist. "We weren't fleet enough, Captain," he added, stating the obvious. "I've got that sinking feeling again," said the pirate with the wooden leg, trying to keep afloat on it. "Never mind the silly jokes," spluttered the captain, striking out for shore a very long way off. "Someone just tell me what that was." That, as it happened, had been Julius Caesar with his entire army and navy off to invade Britain. The ancient Britons had often helped the Gauls fight the Romans, so now that all Gaul was conquered, or as we said before, almost all Gaul, Julius Caesar had decided to cross the Mare Britannicum and invade the British Isles. The people of those islands were rather like the Gauls, many of them being descended from Gaulish tribes. They were brave fighters, and famous for the wonderful stiffness of their upper lips. They spoke the same language as their Gaulish cousins, but with some peculiar expressions all their own. At this very moment, for instance, a couple of ancient Britons were standing on top of some white cliffs, watching the entire fighting power of Rome loom up on the horizon, a terrible and menacing sight, as Caesar came to see and conquer their country. "Good gracious me," said one of the ancient Britons to the other, keeping his upper lip as stiff as ever. "See that huge and warlike fleet looming up on the horizon, old chap? This is a jolly rum thing, eh, what?" "I say," replied his friend, stiffening his upper lip perhaps slightly more than usual. "I say, rather. 'Tis a bit rum, old fruit. I think I could do with a nice cup of hot water." For it was an ancient British custom to drink hot water every day at 5 in the afternoon. And gallantly as the Britons fought, led by their brave chief Cassivellaunus, this and some of their other customs proved rather a drawback in battle. Not only did they stop fighting at hot water time every afternoon, walking out on their disconcerted Roman opponents even in the middle of a desperate fight, they also knocked off entirely for 2 days out of every 7 and went home to their families. This simply infuriated the Roman soldiers, who had come so far on purpose to fight them. Accordingly, that fine strategist Julius Caesar, devised an ingenious way to hoist the ancient Britons with their own petard. He decided to fight only at 5 o'clock on weekdays and all day at the weekend. "Oh, I say," said the British leader, Cassivellaunus, indignantly, as the Roman legions charged his defenceless troops. "The rotten cads! Jolly poor show, what?" But caddish behaviour on the part of the Romans or not, he soon had to surrender, and all Britain was occupied. All? No, because there was one little village still holding out against the invaders. One little village in Cantium, now known as Kent. It was inhabited by a tough tribe of Britons, led by their chief, my kingdom Forenos. That small village soon became the centre of the resistance movement, and many a daring raid on Roman camps was carried out from this base, under cover of the famous British fog, or in the equally famous and particularly wet British rain, when the Romans, being used to the sunny skies of Italy, did not much care for going out. Chieftains from all over Britain, united by their love of liberty, came to Cantium to confer with my kingdom Forenos and his brave warriors. And if you had been there on a certain day, some while after the Roman conquest of Britain, you might have seen 2 visitors approaching, taking care not to be spotted by any Roman patrols. One of them was tall and thin and dressed in trousers with a pattern of colourful checks. He had a lot of yellow whiskers. One of them was short and wide and dressed in a furry tunic. He had a lot of whiskers too. His were ginger. Their names were Britannicus, a chieftain from Caledonia, now Scotland, and Over-Optimistics, a chieftain from Hibernia, now Ireland. "Okay," said Chief Britannicus to his companion, spotting Chief My Kingdom Forenos's house as they entered the village. "Yon's the place the laird bides, man." Then he saw someone he knew, someone thin and sandy-haired, with a pair of blue trousers made of thick and rather hairy fabric, with a herringbone pattern, and one of those amazingly stiff upper lips. It was the chief's right-hand man, coming to welcome the 2 distinguished visitors. "Anticlimax, my old friend," said the Caledonian warmly. "And who are you, the new?" "I say, Mechanics, jolly good to see you," said Anticlimax, shaking hands. Shaking hands was another ancient British custom. "And I see you've got Over-Optimistics with you, what?" "Sure and begorra 'tis myself, straight from t' Emerald Hoyle," agreed Chief Over-Optimistics. "Jolly good show," said Anticlimax. "Awfully decent of both you chaps to come. You must be simply dying for a cup of hot water. Come along in." And before long they were sitting round the fire in the chieftain's hut, with a nice pot of hot water brewing. "Shall I be mother?" said my kingdom Forenos, pouring the hot water. "Pass the milk and sugar, Anticlimax." "Nae sugar for me, man. Just a wee drappy o' milk," said Mechanics. "And now let's get down to business, what?" said Anticlimax. "Fact is, you know, we're in a bit of a fix." "That's right," agreed Chief My Kingdom Forenos. "We're doing our best, but we can't hold out against the Romans on our own much longer. We need help. What are we going to do, what? That's what I wonder, eh, what?" They all sat around thinking for a while. No one had any brainwaves, until at last, inspired by fortifying draughts of hot water, Anticlimax spoke up. "I say, Chief My Kingdom Forenos, old bean, I've had an idea," he announced. "You know, I told you I've got a first cousin once removed who lives in Gaul. Now, his village has been holding out against the Romans for donkey's years, and I've heard that my cousin Asterix and his friends have the secret of a magic potion that gives them superhuman strength. Begorra! And it sounds like a drop of the right stuff," said Over-Optimistics. "Okay," agreed Mechanics. "Anticlimax, old boy, that's a jolly good wheeze," said my kingdom Forenos. "I think you'd better go to Gaul, see your cousin, tell him our story, and bring us back some of that magic potion. Keep a stiff upper lip, best of ancient British luck, and all that sort of thing. Gentlemen, let us all raise a cup of hot water to the success of Anticlimax's mission." And so, after dark, the nimble Anticlimax slipped out of the village and managed to get through the Roman lines unobserved. As he passed the Roman sentries, he heard them chatting. "All quiet tonight," one of the sentries was saying, thankfully. No fog, you see, mate, that's why, said the other sentry, who'd been stationed in Britain longer. The Britons won't try anything when there's no fog or rain. Little do they know, thought Anticlimax, as he made his way unseen to the coast, found a little jolly boat and set off to row to Gaul. He'd been brought up in the tribe of the Oxbridgienses, who lived in those parts of the British Isles now known as Oxford and Cambridge, and were famous for their skill in rowing. So it was child's play for Anticlimax to reach the other side of the Mare Britannicum and land in Gaul. Meanwhile, for a change, peace reigned in the little Gaulish village where Asterix and his friends lived. In fact, it was raining so hard, Obelix complained that the Romans were getting wet. "Lack of moral fibre, that's what it is," he said. "Lost their nerve, gone all feeble. There are hardly any of 'em left hereabouts at all. I'm bored." Asterix and Obelix were sitting outside Asterix's house, peeling a big barrel of exotic tubers to go with roast wild boar for their dinner. They had brought these tubers home from one of their longer voyages, when they went right across the ocean and found a whole new world the other side of it. Roast, mashed, or chipped, New World tubers went very well with boar. For once, however, Obelix's mind was not really on his dinner. He went on grumbling steadily away about the shortage of Romans. "'Tisn't fair," he said sulkily. "That's what I say. 'Tisn't fair." "Obelix," said Asterix patiently, "you know perfectly well most of the Romans have gone to Britain." "I still say it's not fair," muttered Obelix. "Why can't the Britons come here if they want some fun with the Romans, instead of taking them all over to Britain?" "For the last time, Obelix," said Asterix, tossing another tuber into the big tub of water beside him, "the Britons did not take any Romans over to Britain. The Britons don't want the Romans there." "What a waste," sighed Obelix. But here their conversation was interrupted by a slight cough. Looking round, the two friends saw a warrior with a stiff upper lip and a pair of hairy blue trousers. "I say, gentlemen, could you tell me where Mr. Asterix lives, what?" he inquired. "What do you mean, what?" asked the bewildered Obelix, since everyone in the village knew Asterix. "You've come to the right place," said Asterix. "I am Asterix." "Oh, I say, super! Oh, what a bit of luck!" said the visitor, with what passed for a display of emotion in the ancient Briton. "I'm Anticlimax. Shake hands, old boy." "Anticlimax, my first cousin once removed," cried Asterix, delighted, shaking hands as requested. This was not a Gaulish custom. The Gauls tended to kiss each other on both cheeks instead, but Asterix, a seasoned traveller, knew that that kind of thing only embarrassed the Britons. "It's great to see you," he told Anticlimax. "Meet my best friend, Obelix." "Any friend of Asterix is a friend of mine. Sir, I should be proud if you would shake me by the hand," said the Briton. "Ooh, can I really?" asked Obelix, cheering up at the prospect of a bit of action. "Anything to oblige." And he took Anticlimax's hand and shook him by it so vigorously that the Briton was lifted right off his feet and all his teeth rattled. "Obelix, stop it!" yelled Asterix as poor Anticlimax gasped for air. "Put my cousin down, or you'll remove him from the land of the living entirely. Thank you. That's better," he added, as Obelix reluctantly obeyed. "But you said he'd been removed once already," Obelix pointed out. "And anyway, he asked me to shake him, but I know, by the end," said Asterix, trying to be patient. "Look here, Anticlimax is my first cousin, once removed from Britain, and they don't talk quite like us. Are you all right, Anticlimax?" "I'll be fine in a brace of shakes. A jolly good show, what?" said Anticlimax gallantly, concentrating on keeping that upper lip of his stiff. "I say, what strength! I suppose you get it from that magic potion, what?" "That's right," said Asterix. "Obelix fell into the cauldron of magic potion when he was a baby, you see, and we'll never hear the end of it," grumbled Obelix. "Actually, cousin Asterix, it's about your magic potion I came," said Anticlimax. "It's just the thing we need to help us fight the enemy. A tipple to topple the Romans, what?" "Ah, I see. I suspected you were having a spot of bother with the Romans over on your side of the Mare Britannicum," said Asterix. "Well, come along. Let's go and discuss it with our chief vital statistics." "Good show, what?" said Anticlimax happily, as the three of them set off to walk through the village. By now Obelix had decided that even if they were friends rather than enemies, the Britons must be as crazy as the Romans, if not crazier. He couldn't make out the stiff upper lip bit, or the way Anticlimax talked. "What do you keep on saying what for?" he asked curiously. The lack of understanding was mutual. "I say, sir, don't you know what's what?" inquired Anticlimax, somewhat offended. But there was no time to clear up the linguistic difficulty just now, for they had reached the chief's house, where Asterix introduced his cousin to vital statistics, and Obelix tried to explain British customs in case the chief didn't know about them. "He was once removed, but you mustn't shake him too hard, even if he asks you to," he told the baffled vital statistics. Once Asterix had explained matters rather more clearly, however, vital statistics said he would be happy to help the Britons in their struggle against the invading Roman army. "I'll ask our druid Getafix to brew you some magic potion. Lots of it," he said. "That should do the trick." "Good idea," said Asterix. "It'll take a little while to brew, Anticlimax, so come and see round my house and garden while we're waiting." "A garden is a lovesome thing, God wot," quoted Anticlimax, baffling poor Obelix even further. "What's what?" he inquired, bewildered. "Dogmatics," he asked his little dog. "What's what? No, I thought not. Between you and me, these Britons are crazy." Once the garden had been duly inspected, they all went indoors, and Asterix bustled hospitably about the house. "What can I offer you?" he asked his cousin. "A boar? A goat's milk? Some beer?" "I'm dying for a nice cup of hot water," said Anticlimax. "These Britons really are crazy," muttered Obelix to himself. To think of anyone refusing roast boar! Well, it meant all the more for him. Halfway through his third boar, he found time for a little polite table talk. "I like your trousers," he told Anticlimax, looking at the hairy blue herringbone stuff. "They're made of a special Caledonian material called tweed," said the Briton. "I pass another boar, please, Asterix. Does this tweed stuff cost a lot to make up?" asked Obelix, wondering if it would suit him. "Oh, rather. My tailor makes bags out of it," said Anticlimax. Just then, Getafix looked in at the door. "Finished dinner, have you?" he inquired. Obelix said he hadn't, but the druid took no notice. "Then you'd better come round to my place," he went on. "The potion's ready. I believe it's to take away, is that correct?" he added, showing the other three into his house, which was full of strange and interesting jumble of herbs, spices, bunches of mistletoe, spare sickles, simmering cauldrons, pestles and mortars, jars and bottles of mysterious liquids, and all the rest of a druid's stock in trade. A huge cask stood in the middle of the floor. "Here you are, Anticlimax," said Getafix solemnly. "This barrel of potion will give your whole tribe superhuman strength, and the Romans a real headache." "I say, I'm most frightfully grateful, O druid," said Anticlimax. Then the sheer size of the cask registered with him. But how am I ever to get this huge barrel home to Britain all by myself?" "Ah," said Getafix, who hadn't thought of this little problem. "Well, of course, you could always drink some of the potion to make you strong enough to carry the rest, but that would be a bit of waste." "Rather," said Anticlimax. "I mean, we'd all want it all to help thump Romans, eh, what?" The same brilliant idea occurred to Asterix and Obelix at the same moment. They looked at each other. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking, Obelix?" said Asterix. "Oh, let's, Asterix," said Obelix. "Do let's. The Romans have gone to Britain, so why don't we go too? We can have some fun with them there." "Anticlimax," Asterix announced. "If our chief says it's all right, we'll go back to Britain with you." Anticlimax was delighted. "Oh, jolly good show, old fruit," he said. Just then, Vital Statistics himself strolled by to see how things were getting along. He was quite happy to let Asterix and Obelix go to Britain. "There are so few Romans left in these parts, we can do without you for a bit," he said generously. "Oh, I say, what a bit of luck, what?" said the delighted Anticlimax. "It'll be a weight off my mind if you two can lend a hand with that heavy cask." Obelix, equally delighted, was dancing round the room, chanting, "We're going to see the Romans, we're going to see the Romans," while Dogmatix barked happily. Little did he know that on account of the strict British quarantine regulations, he was going to be left at home this time. "Wait a minute, and I'll pack you some spare gourds of potion for the journey," said Getafix. As the Druid was filling a couple of gourds with magic potion, Asterix noticed some plants lying on the table. "What are these strange, exotic-looking herbs, Getafix?" he asked. "Those," said Getafix. "Oh, they come from very far away. I met a traveller from an antique land who gave them to me. I haven't found out what they're actually for yet, but you can take some with you if you like, Asterix." "Thanks, I might as well," said Asterix, pocketing the herbs. "You never know what may come in useful." Soon the little party bound for Britain was ready to set out. Obelix took a fond farewell of Dogmatix, and the whole village turned out to see the travellers off. Cacophonix had every intention of singing them an ode in 25 verses, to inspire them with courage, and was scuttling about looking for his musical instrument. "Where's my lyre?" he asked. "Anyone seen my lyre?" "Lyre?" said the village blacksmith, fully automatics. "Do you mean old Cacophonix? I haven't seen your lyre." "Then what's that you're holding behind your back?" asked the bard suspiciously. There was a sound of something breaking. "Oh, just a couple of sticks I picked up," said the blacksmith. "Liar!" shrieked Cacophonix. "No, it isn't," said the blacksmith, unobtrusively dropping a couple of pieces of wood and a few strings on the ground. It was not the lack of a musical send-off that bothered Obelix as the three companions strode through the Gaulish forest, with Obelix balancing the great barrel of potion on his back, where he usually carried menhirs. He had something much more important on his mind. "We ought to have brought some provisions," he said. "I hear the food in Britain is terrible. I'm told they boil everything in Britain. I'm told they eat it with mint sauce. I'm told they drink their beer warm. I'm told they drink their red wine chilled. Yuck, yuck, and yuck again." "Good gracious me, old chap, British food's delicious," Anticlimax assured him. "You're bound to like it, what? Good," he added, as they came to the seashore where he had landed. "There's my little jolly boat." "It's a jolly little boat," said Asterix doubtfully, thinking of the size of Obelix, not to mention the barrel of potion. "It is smaller than the garden of my uncle, but it is larger than the pen of my aunt," said Anticlimax encouragingly, as they squeezed themselves in and put out to sea, and soon he was rowing strongly towards Britain. Little did the brave seafarers know that at that very moment a Roman galley was leaving Britain for Gaul, with part of the garrison of the fortified Roman camp of Aquarium on board. The centurion in command of the garrison was leaning over the ship's rail, looking miserable, while the naval captain, a jovial soul, tried to cheer him up. "I bet you'll be glad to get back to the peace and quiet of your fortified camp at Aquarium after your tough campaign against the Britons, Centurion Tullius Stratocumulus," he said. "That's what you think, Captain Poisonous Oysters," replied Stratocumulus gloomily. "Peace," he continued. "Quiet," he remarked. "You've no idea, you've simply got no idea. There's a village of raving lunatics right next door to Aquarium. A village of indomitable Gauls. Your true Brits got nothing on that lot. By Jupiter, I'd rather any sort of campaign, however tough, than run into those indomitable Gauls again." "Little jolly boat right ahead," sang out the lookout man in the crow's nest. Anticlimax and his friends spotted the galley at the same time. "Oh, I say, this is a bit of a bore," said Anticlimax, finding it a slight effort to maintain the stiffness of his upper lip. "A Roman galley, what?" "What? What, where? Where?" cried the delighted Obelix, getting all excited. "Romans! Lovely new Romans! Let's get 'em, Asterix!" Asterix was not so sure that this was a good idea. Well, it would certainly break the monotony of the voyage," he said. "But maybe we ought to steer clear of a fight with the Romans just this once. We don't want to endanger the precious barrel of potion." "Oh, come on, Asterix, be a sport," Obelix begged. "Do let's board that Roman galley." And in a moment Asterix relented. "Actually, I don't think we can dodge 'em now," he said. "They're bearing straight down on us. Quick, Anticlimax, take a few drops of magic potion." "What now? "It's nearly hot water time," protested Anticlimax, a man of regular habits. But Asterix insisted. Meanwhile, on board the Roman galley, the captain was chuckling happily. "Ho, ho, 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 ho! A jolly little jolly boat! They must be Gaulish fishermen. The wind's in our favour, so let's have a bit of fun, putting the wind up them." Centurion Stratocumulus was more cautious. "Better not take any risks," he advised. "Risks?" said the captain incredulously. "Risks? A fully armed galley against a tiny little jolly boat? Did you say risks?" "A tiny little jolly boat full of Gauls," the centurion pointed out. "Ha, ha, ha, ha!" chortled Captain Poisonous Oysters. "Wait and see what your Gauls say when they see us coming." Neither he nor Stratocumulus, in fact, had to wait long to find that out. Next moment, to the amazement of the captain, a small Gaul was leaping onto the deck of the galley, shouting, "Boredom by Tutatis!" He was followed by another and much larger Gaul and a medium-sized Briton. That was the entire boarding party. But by the time the Roman soldiers on board had recovered from their surprise enough to count the attackers, they were flying in all directions. Bonk, meow, clonk, bong, wham! This sort of thing was all in a day's work to Asterix and Obelix, but it was a new experience for Anticlimax. All tanked up with magic potion, he was having the time of his life, swinging Roman soldiers off their feet, whirling them through the air and slamming them down on the deck again. "What a smashing potion!" he said happily, smashing yet another Roman into the deck. "I say, chaps, just watch this, what?" And 3 more Romans bit the dust. "I don't believe it," whispered the captain, white-faced. "I simply don't believe it. Only 3 of them." "I did warn you," Stratocumulus pointed out. "In case you're interested, these are the raving lunatics I was telling you about. Indomitable Gauls, that's what we've got here." And then he had to save his breath for other things than talking. "I say, Asterix," suggested Obelix at one point in the punch-up, "why don't we borrow this galley to get the potion to Britain?" "Hush," said Asterix. "Keep quiet about the potion. Our boat's less conspicuous and easier to handle than this galley." Then all of a sudden the weather changed. Up till now it had been a nice fine day with perfect visibility, ideal for thumping Romans. Now, without warning, something thick and white filled the air, surrounding the Gauls and hiding the Romans from view. "Here, what's happening?" asked Asterix, puzzled. "It's fog," the muffled voice of Anticlimax told him through the white stuff. "We get a lot of it in these parts. Soon we shan't be able to see a thing." "Is that you, Asterix?" boomed the disembodied voice of Obelix.
"Ah, yes,"
squeaked a terrified voice with a Roman accent.
"Oh, it is it?"
said Obelix sarcastically.
"Then where's your moustache?"
he inquired, thumping the Roman he had nearly fallen over in the fog. Asterix thought it was time to call the boarding party off. "Come on, Anticlimax and Obelix, we've had our fun," he said. "Let's get back to our boat. I think we've outstayed our welcome."
"I'll say you have, by Jupiter,"
groaned a number of well-thumped Romans feelingly. When at last the fog lifted, Anticlimax and the 2 Gauls were nowhere to be seen. But the once proud Roman galley was in a shocking state, with masts, sails, and rope knocked all which ways, not to mention the unfortunate Roman soldiers themselves. Captain Poisonous Oysters was no longer laughing as he viewed the scenes of devastation on deck. He said, nothing like as cheerily as before. "Right, well, they've gone. Let's get everything ship-shape and, we won't mention this little contretemps again, will we?" He tried casually humming a tune. "Oh, yes, we will mention it again," said Centurion Stratocumulus grimly. "It may not do your career any good, Poisonous Oysters, but who cares about that?" "I do," said the captain, but Stratocumulus took no notice. "This is more important," he said. "I overheard what those indomitable Gauls were saying to each other. They're on their way to Britain with a barrel of magic potion. It must be intended for the British resistance movement. We must turn back and warn our leaders in Britain." Go back to Britain," stammered the captain, appalled. "Anyway, don't you think they lay it on a bit thick about the Gauls' magic potion?" "No, Captain, they do not," moaned the men draped all over the deck in chorus. "Oh, all right, grumbled Captain Poisonous Oysters, and he turned the ship and reluctantly set off back the way he had come. By now the little jolly boat was approaching the British coast, and Obelix was dreaming of a good roast boar. Or maybe 2 good roast boar. Or even better, 3. "Do you often get fog like that, Anticlimax?" asked Asterix. "Oh, no, old chap. Only when it isn't raining," Anticlimax told him. Whereupon the sky clouded over, and to prove his point it began to rain. By the time the 3 friends had hauled the boat and the barrel of potion up on shore, they were drenched to the skin.
"You know what, Asterix,"
said Obelix.
"I've had one of my brain waves. I think a tunnel between Gaul and Britain would be a good notion. Then people could keep out of the fog and the rain on the crossing."
"You've got a point, old chap," agreed Anticlimax. "Actually, we've been thinking of a tunnel ourselves. In fact, we've even started digging one. But it looks like taking a jolly long time, what? Could be another couple of 1,000 years or so before it gets finished. Now," he said, leading the 2 Gauls off through the pouring rain, "I'm taking you to a friendly pub for your first British meal."
"Ooh, I hope they've got boar on the menu,"
said Obelix. Asterix pointed. "See that?" he said. The inn sign could just be made out in the wet gloom. It was in the shape of a pig, and the inn was even called the Jolly Boar.
"Doesn't mean a thing," said Obelix pessimistically. "The Jolly Boar could be the landlord. I once knew a place called the Welcome Inn, but when you actually got inside—"
"Shh, Obelix," whispered Asterix, for they were now inside the British pub, a cheerful-looking place with rows of barrels in it, and a dartboard on the wall, and the landlord was coming to meet them. He obviously knew Anticlimax well, and the 2 of them held a conversation in whispers, after which the landlord came over to welcome the 2 Gauls.
"Anticlimax says you're friends," he said. "Pleased to meet you. I'm sure you can do with a good meal." "Yes, we can," said Obelix eagerly.
"But after that, you'll have to leave," the innkeeper went on. "The Romans are cracking down on closing time. There might be a patrol coming round to check." "We'll have 3 beers while we're waiting for the meal, old chap," said Anticlimax, which Obelix thought an excellent idea, until the beers arrived. His worst fears looked like being confirmed. A tankard of beer, drunk warm, the way the Britons liked it, came as a nasty shock to a Gaul who usually drank his beer chilled. "Oh dear," said Anticlimax, worried, seeing Obelix's face. "Isn't it warm enough? I can get them to take the chill off for you." Just in time, for the sake of Gallo-British relations, the innkeeper called out, "Right-ho, boar coming up!" "Aha!" said Obelix, cheering up again, and expecting a sizzling whole roast boar to arrive on his plate. What he got instead was another shock. A couple of slices of plain boiled boar, and a lot of something green. "Scrumptious mint sauce," explained Anticlimax, tucking in.
"This is a bit of a jolly old boar, what?"
said the disgusted Obelix.
"Not even a very big bit, either."
"Eat up and don't pass remarks," Asterix hissed. "It's not polite. When in Britain, you should do as the Britons do."
"Like boiling boars and eating the poor things with mint sauce," said Obelix gloomily. "These Britons have got a sauce, if you ask me."
As it turned out, however, he was lucky to get anything at all to eat, because at this moment a patrol of Roman soldiers marched in. The decurion in command ordered beer for himself and his men, and warned the landlord it was nearly closing time.
"Just as I was saying to the gentleman over there," said the landlord. "Nearly closing time, I told him."
At this hint, Anticlimax and the Gauls got to their feet and made for the door. It was a pity that Obelix and the barrel he was carrying were so very large and thus so very conspicuous. Not surprisingly, they attracted the decurion's attention.
"Hey, you over there! Wait a minute, by Jupiter!" he shouted. "What have you got in that barrel?"
Asterix did some quick thinking.
"Warm beer," he said.
"Oh," said the decurion.
"Hey, pity! I thought it might have been Gaulish wine," he added wistfully. "Gaulish wine I'd have confiscated like a shot. But warm beer, no thanks, you can keep it. Right, on your way."
"Rum chap, that decurion," said Anticlimax as they left the Jolly Boar. "He doesn't seem to like warm beer."
"Fancy that," said Asterix. "These Romans are crazy,"
Obelix agreed. "Well, we'd better get moving," said Anticlimax. "There are Roman garrisons stationed all along the coast. We have to get to Londinium. It's a big city, the biggest in Britain, and we have friends there. What we need is a horse and cart, then we'll get there sooner." They were in luck. They soon found a horse and cart to borrow. "Gee up," said Anticlimax, taking the reins. "Off we go to Londinium, then."
You do know you're driving on the wrong side of the road, don't you, Anticlimax?" said Asterix anxiously. Like all the Gauls, he always drove on the right-hand side, and he felt they could be heading for a nasty accident.
"Oh, no, old boy, you Gauls are the ones who drive on the wrong side," Anticlimax assured him. "Once we finish that tunnel under the Mare Britannicum, you lot on the continent will have to change over."
"These Britons are really, really crazy," sighed Obelix.
But there was no time to discuss the finer points of an international highway code, because right ahead, and marching towards them, the three friends spotted "a Roman patrol," said Anticlimax.
"Ooh, goody, just what we came for. Let's charge straight through 'em," said Obelix hopefully.
"No, Obelix. Our first duty is to the potion. We must make sure we get it safely to Anticlimax's village," Asterix reminded him. "We'd better avoid 'em and slip by unobserved. About turn." So Anticlimax turned the cart, only to see coming down the road in the other direction, "Another Roman patrol!" he exclaimed. "Oh, I say, this is a bit thick, what?" Little did the three friends know that not long after they themselves left the Jolly Boar, a breathless messenger had arrived to tell the Decurion and his patrol that all Roman garrisons were being alerted. Centurion Stratocumulus had landed with his news, and now the search was on for 3 men.
"3 dangerous men," the messenger reported, "and they've got a secret weapon with them, in a barrel."
"Horrors! Warm beer, by Jupiter!" cried the Decurion, reeling. He had been playing darts. He was hopeless at darts. At the thought of the warm beer, the darts he was holding fell from his nerveless hand.
"No, that weapon's no secret," the messenger pointed out. "The barrel contains a magic potion. It's on its way to help the Britons holding out in that revolting little village down in Kentium. Orders are to seize it."
And thus, a little later, Asterix, Obelix, and Anticlimax found themselves in the middle of the road, with 2 lots of Romans advancing on them from opposite directions.
"It's them, by Jupiter!" shouted the Romans, sighting their quarry.
"They've spotted us, by Tutatis!" gasped Asterix.
"Quick! We can't go on! We can't go back! We'd better cut across country!"
"Yikes! Tally-ho! Gone away!" shouted Anticlimax, uttering a traditional British war cry, and off they went across country. A little way off across country, an ancient Briton was tending his patch of grass. "Coming along nicely," he murmured to himself. "Another couple of 1,000 years of loving care, and I think it'll make quite a decent bit of turf." He was far from pleased, when next moment a horse and cart, heavily laden with 3 people and a barrel, charged right across the grass, churning it up and leaving large muddy ruts and hoof-prints. "Oh, I say, that's a bit off," said the ancient Briton. His upper lip remained stiff, but he was very angry indeed. "I call that rather bad form, I really do." And he picked up a spear he happened to have handy, ready to repel any more intruders. Accordingly, when the Romans came charging over the turf too in pursuit of Asterix and the others, yelling, "Got 'em! They're trapped!" they found themselves brought up short by an indignant Briton, lecturing them at spear point. "Here, I say, sir, please keep off the grass," the Briton told the Decurion in command. "A Briton's home is his castle, don't you know, and his garden is jolly well part of it, so there." "By Jupiter, Briton," bawled the Decurion, "how dare you bar the way of the emissaries of Rome?" "Trespassers will be prosecuted," continued the ancient Briton, taking no notice, for he was now well into his stride. "Look at those hoof marks. Look at those ruts. Who's going to pay for the damage? That's what I'd like to know. I warn you, I'll be writing to the ancient Times about this, sir. Now, kindly push off, or I push you off, with this spear." The Roman pushed off, and thanks to this timely intervention, the 3 friends made their escape from both Roman patrols. Meanwhile, in Londinium, the atmosphere was not exactly cheery. In the palace of the Roman governor of Britain, Encyclopaedicus Britannicus. The governor was interviewing the 2 centurions who commanded the garrison of the city. With the best will in the world, they couldn't make the reports they had to deliver sound encouraging. "A cunning lot, these Gaulish undercover agents, Encyclopaedicus Britannicus, sir," explained the 1st centurion. "They gave us a slip. Don't ask me how." "That's exactly what I am asking you," said the governor frostily. "It'll have been the fog, or the rain, or the warm beer, or something," said the 2nd centurion, coming to his friend's aid. "But anyway, they're making for Londinium." "Then they must be captured as soon as they get here, by Juno," said the angry governor. "This is vital. I must have that barrel of magic potion. The men will probably take refuge in a public house somewhere, taking their cask of magic potion with them. So, search all the pubs in Londinium and confiscate every barrel you find. And if you don't get the right one," he bellowed, "I'll have you boiled and served to the lions. With mint sauce," he finished, saving the ultimate threat until last. "How horrible," said the 1st centurion faintly. "Yes, poor things," agreed the 2nd centurion. "Cruelty to dumb animals, I call it." Sure enough, Asterix, Obelix, and Anticlimax were not far from Londinium now. They stopped in a little wood to plan their course of action. "The city gates are sure to be guarded," said Anticlimax. "We'd better wait for fog. Then we can slip past unnoticed." "Wait for fog?" said Asterix, dismayed. "But that might take ages." "Oh, no, old boy," Anticlimax reassured him. "Fog comes down jolly fast at this—" he began, as white vapour suddenly swirled around the 3 friends. "At this time of year," he finished, lost from sight. "These Britons are crazy," muttered a voice somewhere in the fog.
"Just what I was going to say myself, Asterix,"
said a voice somewhere else in the fog. "Told you it wouldn't take long," said Anticlimax, pleased. "Well, what are we waiting for? Come on, you chaps." So they came on. They got past the sentries at the city gates before the fog cleared, and when it did, they were driving through the streets of Londinium with their precious barrel. Anticlimax was making for a pub called the Jug and Amphora. It had a sign outside saying, "Gaulish wines our speciality." "We'll find friends here," said Anticlimax, knocking on the door with the special secret knock of the ancient British resistance. In a moment, the innkeeper looked out. He and Anticlimax were very glad to see each other, though it hardly showed because of their astonishingly stiff upper lips. "Hello, dipsomaniacs," said Anticlimax, shaking hands.
"Ah, it's you and the Gauls, Anticlimax,"
said Dipsomaniacs.
"Righto, you can come in. The coast's clear, no Romans about at the moment, but they're on your track."
And he let the 3 fugitives in.
"You'd better stay hidden here in Londinium until the fuss has died down, and go on to the rebel village later," he suggested. "I'll hide your barrel in my cellar. I've got plenty of barrels of Gaulish wine down there. They're all marked with my name, and I'll mark it on this one too, for camouflage."
Soon the barrel of potion was safely stowed away, hidden among Dipsomaniacs' casks of Gaulish wine.
"And now for a bite to eat," said the landlord hospitably, going off to the kitchen. "Asterix, you don't think the bite to eat will be boiled boar again, do you?"
whispered Obelix. But Asterix shushed him, because Dipsomaniacs was coming back with a steaming cauldron.
"Chef's special,"
he announced. "Don't tell me," said Asterix.
"Boiled boar? However did you guess?" said Dipsomaniacs. "What would you like to wash it down? Hot water? Iced red wine? No, right. Then here's some nice warm beer." "These Britons," Obelix began.
"Are very kind and hospitable," said Asterix quickly. "Shut up, Obelix, and drink your beer before it gets cold." However, before Obelix could tackle the warm beer and boiled boar, there was a thunderous knocking at the door, and loud shouts of "Open up in the name of Caesar" were heard outside. One good thing about the Britons, Asterix decided, was that they didn't get flustered easily. It took more than a few Roman soldiers banging on his door to bother Dipsomaniacs.
"I say, a Roman patrol, don't you know?" he commented with mild interest. "Oh, well,
"You better hide down here," he added, lifting a trap door which led to a secret hidey-hole under the floorboards. By now the door of the pub was beginning to give under the force of the Roman soldiers' blows. "Are you opening up, or aren't you, by Jupiter?" yelled a particularly loud voice. "Coming, coming," called the landlord, easing the trap door back into place. "Frightfully sorry," he told the decurion in command of the patrol as he opened the door. "I had something on the boil." "Boar, I suppose," said the decurion, blenching, even though he was a huge, hefty fellow. "Never mind that. We are looking for 3 men. Search this pub," he ordered his legionaries. The Roman soldiers crowded in and started searching, while the decurion leant back comfortably against the bar to supervise operations. A few minutes later, a man came back to report. "We didn't find anyone, decurion, sir, but the cellar's full of barrels." "Barrels? Right," said the decurion. "Confiscate the lot." "I say, this is a bit thick, what?" Dipsomaniacs complained, as legionaries began trundling barrel after barrel up from the cellar, over the floor and out of the door. "Those barrels of Gaulish wine are my stock in trade. You ruin me." "Those are our orders, landlord," the decurion told him. "We are to confiscate all barrels. We're looking for one with a secret weapon in it. Your name's on all those barrels we're taking, right? Well, if by any chance it's on the particular barrel we're after," he added in a sinister tone, and left his sentence purposefully unfinished. "Get my meaning? Are they?" And the soldiers left, taking Dipsomaniacs' precious barrels of Gaulish wine with them, and the yet more precious barrel of magic potion. Dipsomaniacs let the others out of the hidey-hole again. "Poor show, what?" he remarked as Anticlimax came up, with typical British restraint. "Rather trying, yes," agreed Anticlimax, with more of the same. "Bit of a bore, in fact," said Dipsomaniacs. "I say it is a bit," said Anticlimax. "Oh, for goodness sake, never mind the stiff upper lip exercises," said Asterix impatiently. "Instead of getting all steamed up about it, why don't we think how to get our barrel back before the Romans open it and discover what's inside?" "There's nothing we can do until tomorrow, old boy," Dipsomaniacs told him. "No one's allowed out after dark but Roman soldiers. You'd only be, well, conspicuous," he added, looking at the huge bulk of Obelix. "Oh, well," said Asterix quickly, seeing that if Obelix had time to work this one out, he might well take offence. "In that case, let's take our chance to get a bit of sleep." And so they did. Meanwhile, however, there were some strange goings-on at the governor's palace. Patrol after patrol of Roman legionaries came marching in, trundling barrel after barrel of wine and beer. All the barrels were labelled with the names of the landlords from whose premises they had come. Tintax, Haystacks, Anthrax, and so on. And among them, of course, was a large consignment labelled Dipsomaniacs. "All the barrels in the cellars of the city inns have been confiscated, Encyclopaedicus Britannicus," reported the centurions, "and they are now down in the cellars of the palace." Governor Encyclopaedicus Britannicus began to look a little more cheerful. So far the operation was going according to plan. "Excellent," he told the centurions. "Now I want all your men to start tasting the contents of the barrels. That way we may be lucky enough to find the barrel of magic potion. Action stations!" Down in the palace cellars, therefore, the legionaries engaged in an interesting tactical manoeuvre never before attempted in the history of the Roman army. "On the command!" shouted the centurion in charge. "1 barrel per legionary," he barked. "And notify your commanding officer if it tastes funny. No falling out of line. At in. Hop! Casks! Broach!" he bellowed. In their right hands the legionaries were holding hatchets. With the famous well-drilled precision of the Roman army, they brought their hatchets down with a mighty crash, staving in the tops of the barrels. In their left hands the legionaries were holding tin mugs, ready for the next order. "By the left! Quick! Drink!" roared the centurion. "And mark any barrel you've tasted with a cross. Well, now I'll leave you to it. Carry on tasting!" They did. The manoeuvre went on for hours, and hours, and hours. At first it was conducted in an orderly and correct manner, with all the famous well-drilled precision you would expect of the Roman army. After a bit, it got a little less orderly, and the legionaries began to feel less precise. In fact, they began to feel slightly peculiar. Then they began to feel very peculiar. Then they got the hiccups. Being Romans, they hiccuped in Latin. Hic, hike, hoc, they hiccuped. Soon after that, they started disobeying the order not to fall out of line. They could hardly help it, what with the way everything seemed to be going round and round in front of their eyes. Some of them started singing. Some of them got quarrelsome, shoving their comrades aside and offering to fight anyone who came between them and the next barrel they were planning to taste. One legionary made his way unsteadily over to a barrel that no one had broached yet. "Here's another nice little barrel," he hiccuped. "Dear little barrel, my little barrel," he said lovingly, dipping his mug in and tipping the contents down his throat. "Keep out," he added, seeing one of his friends staggering towards him, hoping for a taste of the new barrel too. "Keep out! This is my barrel. I mean, my barrel. Hurrah!" And he swung a punch. It worked a lot better than he could have expected. In fact, the effect was most surprising. His friend shot up in the air, up and up, right to the cellar ceiling. "Something odd about this barrel of mine," thought the legionary muzzily. "Somehow or other, gives me a kind of feeling I've got superhuman strength. Odd, that. Very odd. Must try it on someone else. Hey, you! Come over here!" he told another of his friends. It worked a second time, too. And a third. And a fourth. And so on. At last, the barrel of magic potion had been found. The legionary who had found it, however, had quite forgotten that he was supposed to notify anyone. He just went on trying out its remarkable effects. Meanwhile, Asterix, Obelix, and Anticlimax, determined to find the precious barrel of potion themselves, set out in search of it next day. "Dipsomaniacs will lend us his cart," said Anticlimax. "He's a jolly good chap, old Dipsomaniacs, don't you know?" Asterix and Obelix said they did know. They realized that, from one Briton to another, this was a fulsome and extravagant tribute. Their destination was the governor's palace, but on the way the two Gauls had a chance to see the sights of Londinium. They spotted a red double-decker chariot, such as you never saw in Gaul. "That's a goad-assisted, 2-ox-power, numerous quartus run by Londinium Transport," Anticlimax told them. "And what are those little portable roofs?" asked Asterix, seeing people walking about with funny furled-up things on sticks, which they unfurled and held over their heads from time to time. "They're to stop the sky falling on our heads," Anticlimax explained. Asterix nodded. The ancient Britons shared the Gauls' fear of this particular natural disaster, so it seemed a very sensible notion. "I say, Asterix, I think this bridge is falling down," said Obelix in some alarm as they went across the river. "Of course it is, old boy," Anticlimax confirmed cheerfully enough. "Londinium Bridge is always falling down, don't you know? People make a great song and dance about it." "Never mind the sightseeing now, Obelix," said Asterix. "We're getting near the palace." "How are we going to slip past the sentries?" Anticlimax wondered. "Got one of your clever plans, have you, Cousin Asterix?" Asterix thought. "We haven't got time to do anything too clever," he decided. "If they stop us, we'll just bash 'em." This was the kind of plan Obelix really liked.
"That's what I call a brainwave," he said, rubbing his hands with glee. "Jolly good show," he added, for he was picking up the local language fast. In fact, when they reached the palace, they found that the sentries on duty were not quite their usual alert and upright selves. The man at the gate was swaying on his feet and hiccuping quietly from time to time. "Hullo, this is a bit odd," said Asterix, puzzled. "Anticlimax, you wait here outside the palace. Obelix and I will go in and see what's up. If we don't come out, go and get reinforcements." "Right-ho," said Anticlimax, and Asterix marched boldly up to the sentry. Who goes there?" asked the sentry, trying to focus on the two Gauls. "We're plumbers," said Asterix. "That's it. Me and my mate here, we're plumbers, come to see about the pipes. That's our story, and we're sticking to it." But he needn't have worried. "Are we plumbers?" said the sentry, with a most unmilitary giggle. "Come along in, all four of you," he added, peering blearily at Asterix and Obelix again. "Come along in and long live plumbers."
when he finally fell to the ground, armour clanging. "What on earth's been going on here?" Asterix wondered out loud as they went into the palace. For it was not just that one sentry. All the guards were either in the same strangely unsteady state, or flat on their backs asleep. "Well, it certainly makes things easier for us. And this must be the only way down to the cellar," he added, finding a staircase. "We ought to find the barrels the Romans have confiscated down there." They did. They also found one legionary still on his feet and full of fight, shouting belligerently to anyone who cared to listen, "I'm the strongest. Anyone want to taste my barrel? Come on, and shoot her. Come on, you two fatties," he said, catching sight of Obelix. "Come on, let's have a nice little fight." This was more than Obelix could take. He was furious.
"There are not two fatties. There's only one. And anyway, he isn't fat,"
he said, and he waded straight in and knocked the Roman legionary right out of his Roman sandals. The Roman soared through the air, hit his head on the stone wall of the cellar, made a crash landing on the stone floor of the cellar, and lay there. "I don't think you ought to have done that, Obelix," said Asterix regretfully, looking at the Roman soldier's unconscious form. "I really don't think you ought to have done that. I've an idea that legionary might have helped us to find our barrel of magic potion. Look, here are all the barrels I took from Dipsomaniac's pub, labelled with his name. But how can we tell which is the right one now?"
"Obvious," said Obelix. "We'll have to taste 'em."
And picking up a Roman helmet to use as a mug, he started in on the nearest barrel. "Nah, that won't work," Asterix objected. "We don't want to hang around the palace too long. Stopping to taste all Dipsomaniac's barrels would be dangerous."
"Dangerous? But nice,"
said Obelix, tasting happily away. "Oh, Obelix," sighed Asterix. "You know you're not used to wine. Stop that, do, and help me carry these barrels out to the cart. We'd have to make several journeys." Obelix helped with the barrels, but he was still tasting as he and Asterix hurried back and forth, loading them up on the cart where Anticlimax was waiting for them. "That's the lot," said Asterix with a sigh of relief. "Off we go, Anticlimax. We must try and look inconspicuous," he added, as the cart moved away. Looking inconspicuous was easier said than done, when they had not only a full cartload of barrels, but Obelix draped over the top of them. A noticeable figure at the best of times, he was making himself even more so by singing.
"Ha, ha, ha, hee, 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 little brown cask, don't I love thee?"
he warbled. "Shut up, Obelix," hissed Asterix. "People will stare." This upset the big man. His best friend was angry with him. He did not like his best friend to be angry with him. He burst into tears.
"Ooh," he wept. "You don't love me any more, Asterix."
"Of course I love you, Obelix," snapped the exasperated Asterix. "But if you don't keep quiet, you'll bring the Roman patrols down on us." The mere idea of it quite upset Obelix.
"I love you, Asterix," he tearfully protested. "And if any Roman patrol touches a hair of your head, they'll be sorry," he threatened, his mood beginning to change.
"Oh, I say, a Roman patrol, what?" exclaimed Anticlimax, in restrained British dismay, as they turned a corner and he looked down the road. But by now Obelix was at the quarrelsome stage, and spoiling for a fight.
"Nasty, rotten old Roman patrol! Hands off my friend Asterix, eh, what?"
he yelled, and to his friend Asterix's horror, he leapt out of the cart and charged the soldiers. The Romans were first astonished, and then delighted to see the strange figure of a huge Gaul rushing straight towards them. "It must be one of those Gauls we're after," said the Decurion commanding the patrol. "He's just like his description, the big fat man. Let's get him, by Jupiter." Before they could do anything about it, however, Obelix was among them, knocking out Romans right, left, and centre, and not forgetting to collect all their helmets as trophies, as was his habit, even when sober. However, he was not especially sober just now, and Asterix was not sure that even his huge friend could cope with all those Romans alone. "We must go and help Obelix," he told Anticlimax. "He's not in his normal state of mind." I say, has he got a normal state of mind? What? Inquired Anticlimax, with interest. But he and Asterix took a quick swig of magic potion and jumped down from the cart. By the time they reached Obelix, though, he had finished off the whole patrol, and was standing there swaying, holding his pile of helmets.
I feel so sleepy, Asterix,
he murmured, putting a hand to his aching head. Next moment he had keeled over and was lying on the ground, flat out, like the Romans he had been thumping. "Oh dear, poor old Obelix," said Asterix. "All he usually drinks is goat's milk, so that wine really went to his head," he explained to Anticlimax. "He'll feel terrible when he wakes up." And there was worse to come. As they went to Obelix's aid, leaving Dipsomaniac's cart unattended, the cousins had not noticed a shady character coming up quietly behind them. "An unattended cart," muttered the shady character. "What a bit of luck for an unattended cart thief." He then got in and simply drove it off, while Anticlimax and Asterix were otherwise occupied. Only now did Anticlimax realise it had gone missing, and with it, of course, all Dipsomaniac's barrels, including the barrel of magic potion. "Oh, no," sighed Asterix. "We're almost back to square one. Well, I suppose we'd better get Obelix back to Dipsomaniac's pub to sleep it off, and then you and I will go and look for the cart, Anticlimax." Morale was not high in the courtyard of the Roman governor's palace either. Encyclopaedicus Britannicus was pacing furiously up and down, bawling out the legionaries from the barrel-tasting session, who were all feeling decidedly unwell. "I'm ashamed of you," he told them. "You've been acting like a lot of barbarians, declining and falling all over the place. If Julius Caesar gets to hear of this, you'll be sorry. It'll be a visit to the Circus Maximus for you, in the arena, with the man-eating lions. Quite a Roman holiday you'll be having, get it?" he roared. "Oh, my poor head," groaned one of the soldiers. "I wouldn't mind being eaten by the lions. Anything, if only he'd shut up." "Sir," reported the centurion who had been in charge of the tasting, "the only barrels that have gone missing are the ones belonging to Dipsomaniacs." "Right," shouted the governor. "Search his pub and arrest everyone in it." As the centurion led out his patrol to obey the governor's orders, he met his colleague, who had been in charge of the other patrol, the one which had just had that interesting little encounter with Obelix. The Romans coming in were in even worse shape than the Romans going out, and that was saying something. "Ave, we're off to look for the Gauls," said the outgoing centurion, saluting his friend. "Ave," groaned the incoming centurion. "We just found them." But revenge was about to be inflicted for the damage the Gauls had done. When Asterix and Anticlimax got back to the jug and amphora from a fruitless search of the streets of Londinium, finding not a trace of the cart and the missing barrels, a terrible sight met their eyes. "Hey!" gasped Asterix. "Look at Dipsomaniac's place." "Oh, I say! My goodness!" exclaimed Anticlimax, moved to strong language for once. For the pub wasn't there any more. It was nothing but a heap of charred ruins. A neighbour with a broom looked cautiously out of her doorway. "What happened?" Anticlimax asked her. "Oh, it was terrible," she said. "The Romans came, they saw, they conquered, they searched the place, smashed everything up, and went off with 2 prisoners, Dipsomaniacs, and a fat man who was asleep under a lot of helmets." "Obelix," said Asterix, unerringly identifying his friend. "Poor old Obelix, taken prisoner by the Romans. What on earth are we going to do?" "I said, cheer up," Anticlimax said. He'd never heard Asterix sound so downcast before. "Keep a stiff upper lip, what? Grin and bear it, all that sort of thing." "No, I will not grin and bear it. Stiff upper lip my foot," shouted Asterix, working himself up into a real Gaulish rage. "We're going to get 'em both back, that's what. Obelix and the magic potion. We'll rescue 'em both, so there. Now, where would the Romans have taken Obelix and Dipsomaniacs?" he asked his cousin, calming down again. To Tower of Londinium, I should think, said Anticlimax. It's the maximum security prison. There are only 2 gates, and they're both heavily guarded. Not heavily enough to keep us out, said Asterix. He took out the gourd Getafix had given him when he left the village, and made Anticlimax do the same. Now, to drink the last of our magic potion, and off we go. Romans, here we come! The Tower of Londinium was a strange and sinister place. Up and up it rose into the sky, and high in the clouds, around the top of the tower, ravens, birds of ill omen, wheeled and circled, croaking gloomily. Inside the maximum security prison, in a cell near the top, Obelix was beginning to come round. Like the Roman soldiers, he had a splitting headache. "Where am I?" he groaned. "In the Tower of Londinium," said Dipsomaniacs. He was sitting beside Obelix. They were both chained to the wall. "I'm afraid we've had it. But we won't talk," Dipsomaniacs bravely added. "Even if they boil us alive and serve us with mint sauce, we won't talk, what?" he announced at the top of his voice. "Don't let's shout anyway," said Obelix faintly. He began pulling himself together. "Well, we can't stop here, you know. Asterix will be worried. Goodness knows what he must be thinking now. He may be afraid I'm in danger. Good old Asterix. He's always worrying about me." "And well he may, old fruit," said Dipsomaniacs. "Well he may." "There you are, then. See what I mean," said Obelix reasonably. "We must go and set his mind at rest. Besides, I need some fresh air and a drink of water. I've got a mouth like sandpaper, and I feel quite weak. Let's get out of here." "Get out of here?" Looking at the stout chains fastening them to the wall, Dipsomaniac shook his head sadly. "Poor fellow, he's gone completely bonkers. Just in case you hadn't noticed, Obelix, we're chained up in a cell, in the maximum security jail." Without any trouble at all, Obelix rose to his feet, snapping the heavy chain like a stick. Dipsomaniac stared. "We were chained up," said Obelix. "Having a bit of trouble with yours, are you? Let me help you," he added kindly, and snapped his companion's chain too. Then he marched over to the door. "Oi, you there!" he shouted to the Roman soldier on guard the other side. "Open up if you value your door. We're coming out, we are." The guard thought this very funny, since the door was about a foot thick and studded with iron. "Ho, ho, ho," he said sarcastically. "Prisoner with a sense of humour we got here, I see. Coming out, eh? Just you try it." "Anything you say," agreed Obelix. He casually put out one hand and gave the door a little tap. It caved in and fell to the floor outside with a mighty crash. "Coming?" he asked Dipsomaniacs. "After you," said Dipsomaniacs, much impressed. They made their way down the Tower of Londinium. Obelix thumped any Romans they happened to meet en route. "Ow!" screeched the Romans. "Ouch! By Jupiter, stop it! No, I want my mater!" Armour clanged as legionary after legionary fell reeling to the ground. "Interesting little tour of the Tower of Londinium, that," said Obelix, emerging with Dipsomaniacs and another pile of Roman helmets through Gate 1 at the bottom of the tower. At the same moment, Asterix and Anticlimax, well fortified with magic potion, were coming in at Gate 2, round the other side of the tower, having brushed the sentry on duty there out of the way. They were starting to go up the Tower of Londinium. "Ouch! Oh, not again! Stop it, by Jupiter!" moaned the unhappy Romans they met on the way. Funny thing, they thought dizzily, insofar as they were able to think at all. Gauls all over the place today. At last Asterix reached the top of the tower. There was no sign of his friend. "Obelix! Where are you?" he shouted. "He must be somewhere around," he remarked to Anticlimax. "None of the Romans we passed on the way up had any helmets on." "Obelix!" he yelled. "Hullo! That's Asterix up there," said Obelix down below. "Let's go up and find him." "You're never going back inside the tower?" gasped Dipsomaniacs. "When we've only just got out?" "Why not?"
said Obelix. "You never know your luck. The Romans in there may have got their spare helmets on by now. Here I am, Asterix. Just coming up," he shouted.
"Here I am, Obelix. Just coming down," shouted Asterix. "Oh, no! Oh, help! Stop it!" groaned the Romans. "Make your minds up, do! Come in or go out, but for Jupiter's sake, stop thumping us!" At last the friends met, in the middle of the tower, and went back down together, taking with them Obelix's impressive new collection of helmets. Anticlimax and Dipsomaniac shook hands, not saying anything much, but adjusting their stiff upper lips in a British sort of way. Obelix was feeling rather ashamed of himself for tasting that wine so recklessly.
"I'm very sorry about what happened, Asterix," he apologised. "I won't do it again. I promise."
"Ah, it was nothing," said Asterix soothingly, and they walked away from the Tower of Londinium. "Nothing," moaned the sentry at Gate 2 as they passed by. He was still flat on the grass where Asterix had knocked him on the way in. "Nothing. That's the best one yet." Shortly afterwards, the two hapless centurions commanding the garrison of Londinium were obliged to make their report on recent events to Governor Encyclopaedicus Britannicus. "Escaped!" shouted the governor. "What do you mean, escaped?" "Oh, well, they kind of got away, oh, Encyclopaedicus Britannicus, sir," said the centurions. "Then get them back, or I'll have the whole garrison drowned in warm beer," bawled the governor, as the two centurions scurried off gasping. "Yes, sir, certainly, sir." It was just too much for the unhappy governor. In the privacy of his office, he broke down, beating his fist on the marble slab of his desktop, and sobbing, "Britons, Gauls, drunks, I'm sick of it all. I'm sick of the Britons. I'm sick of their warm beer. I'm sick of their rain and their fog. I'm fed to the teeth with their boiled boar and mint sauce. In fact, I'm fed up with the whole boiling lot of them." While the Gauls were safely out of the Tower of Londinium, however, they were not safe yet. Nor had they recovered the priceless barrel of magic potion, which was destined for that little village in Cantium. In spite of the damage to his own property, the brave Dipsomaniacs was still their firm friend, and came up with a helpful suggestion. "I'll take you to see a cousin of mine, Asterix," he said. "He keeps a pub too. His name's Surtax. He may be able to help us." "Jolly good wheeze, what?" said Anticlimax, brightening up. They soon arrived at Surtax's pub. Surtax himself had an upper lip as stiff as his cousin's, but by now the Gauls were getting used to British restraint, and realised he was relieved and delighted to find that Dipsomaniacs was safe. "I say, old chap," he said, "I heard the Romans had arrested you. It gave me quite a turn. I'm fearfully pleased to see you." "I say, fearfully pleased to see you too, Surtax," replied Dipsomaniacs, with an equally extravagant display of feeling. "Well, we mustn't let our emotions run away with us, or anything like that, must we?" said Surtax. "I've got somebody to show you, Dipsomaniacs, old chap. Over here, look. I had a visitor. Shady sort of character, though he said he was British. He sold me this barrel of wine, made me an offer I couldn't refuse, said it fell off the back of a chariot. It turns out to have your name on it. One of the stolen barrels," said Anticlimax, getting quite excited for a Briton. He and the two Gauls hurried over to inspect it. "Not the one with the magic potion in it, I'm afraid," said Asterix, when he had taken a closer look. "But the man who sold it to you must be the thief who stole the cart and all the barrels. If only we could catch up with him." "Well, you may yet," said Surtax. "I had the chap followed, and I can tell you his address. It's LVII Park Lane." In Roman numerals, of course, LVII meant 57. "Stout fella," said Anticlimax, slapping Surtax on the back. "Is Park Lane far from here?" asked Asterix. "Quite a way," said Anticlimax. "Better have some boiled boar before you start out after the thief to keep you going," suggested Surtax.
"Let's get going after the thief right away," said Obelix hastily.
It was clear by now that he never would appreciate boiled boar. Park Lane was a long, long road with a lot of houses, all looking exactly the same.
"It's a good job we've got the number," said Obelix.
"Here we are," said Anticlimax. This one's number LVII.
Coming, Asterix?
Asked Obelix. Coming, Obelix, said Asterix. Obelix leant on the door very, very gently, and it caved in and fell to the floor with a mighty crash, just like the cell door in the Tower of Londinium. Unfortunately, when the three potion hunters got inside, they found no guilty unattended cart thief, no stolen cart, and no stolen barrels. Only a highly respectable British couple sitting down to their hot water. "Hey, sir, didn't you know a Briton's hut is his castle?" inquired the wife, looking rather crossly at the door. "There, there, Boadicea, dear, calm down," said her husband, soothingly. "Doubtless these gentlemen will explain their behaviour." "Oh, I say, this is number LVII, isn't it?" said Anticlimax, beginning to fear that there was some error. "No, actually it's not," said the householder. "You'll want next door. This is number LVIII, but one of the I's fell off." "Our mistake," Anticlimax apologised. "We'll pay for your door, of course. Do excuse us, won't you?" "Rather, old boy, what?" said the householder, whose upper lip was of the requisite British stiffness. "Boadicea," he added to his wife as the visitors left, "do remind me to put that missing eye back sometime." But now the Gauls and Anticlimax were on the right track. They soon identified the real number LVII Park Lane. "I think we're right this time," said Anticlimax, counting eyes.
Coming, Asterix?
said Obelix, hopefully. "Coming, Obelix," said Asterix. So Obelix gave the door a very gentle little kick. Stepping in over the door, where it lay flat on the floor inside, Asterix, Obelix, and Anticlimax found a very shifty-looking little man. "Is this number LVII? You haven't got an eye missing, have you?" asked Asterix. "Yes, no," stammered the terrified thief. "What right have you—" But Asterix interrupted him. "Aha!" he exclaimed with satisfaction, spotting something in the corner. "What do you mean, aha?" asked the thief faintly. "That barrel," Asterix explained. "Aha!" I bought it legally," the man claimed. Naturally, none of them believed him, but when Anticlimax bent over to sniff the contents of the barrel, he had to admit, "No, I'm afraid this one's not the magic potion." "We've got the thief, though," said Asterix grimly, "and he can tell us where to find the right barrel, can't you, thief?"
Talk, by Tutatis,
Obelix told him, inadvertently breaking the table with a single blow of his fist. The terrified thief jumped and sent his cup of hot water flying. "What a lot of noise they're making next door, Boadicea," said the householder on the other side of the wall, sipping his own hot water.
Talk, will you? Talk. Well, are you going to talk or aren't you? Roared Obelix, shaking the thief until his bones rattled.
"I say, I do wish that chap next door would talk and let me drink my hot water in peace," said the householder mildly. His wish was granted. I'll talk, gasped the thief. "Oh, good show," said the householder on the other side of the wall, picking up his hot water cup and settling down with his Daily News slab, the Ancient Times. "All right," stammered the thief. "I confess I stole your cart, and I sold all the barrels except this one, and I've got the names and addresses of all my customers, and I would also like to have a list of everything I stole last month taken into consideration. Got a stone tablet to carve it down on, and an hour or so to spare, have you?" The Gauls and Anticlimax weren't interested in that. They were satisfied with the names of the pubs to which the thief had sold the stolen barrels. "We'll visit 'em all," said Asterix, as they walked up Park Lane again with the list. "One of these landlords must have the barrel of magic potion." So they began a pub crawl. The first on their list was called the Angle's Rest, and they walked straight in. "What'll it be, gentlemen?" asked the landlord. "Did you buy any barrels of wine marked with the name of dipsomaniacs recently?" asked Asterix. "Yes, as a matter of fact, I did," said the innkeeper. "I bought one earlier today. I needed a barrel of wine in a hurry, you see, because the Romans had confiscated everything in my cellar. Well, what can I get you, gentlemen?" "A cup of wine, please," said Asterix. "Just one cup of wine between the three of you?" said the astonished landlord. "You must be from Caledonia, what?" For the Caledonians had a wholly undeserved reputation in Britain for meanness. However, He served them a single cup of wine, shaking his head sadly. The three of them bent their own heads over it and sniffed. "That's wine, all right," said Asterix, disappointed. "Good gracious, of course it's wine. It's perfectly safe to drink it," said the indignant landlord, as Asterix handed the cup back, untouched. "No, thanks. We were only looking," said Asterix, and they left, unaware that a Roman patrol lurking just round the corner had spotted them. At the governor's orders, the two centurions had sent out their men once more to scour the streets of Londinium for the wanted men, 2 Gauls and 1 Briton. And now the patrol on watch just round the corner from the Angler's Rest had struck lucky. "Shall we nab 'em?" one of the legionaries asked eagerly. "No," said the decurion, commanding the patrol thoughtfully. He was unusually bright for a Roman decurion. "I want to find out what they were doing in that pub." "What were they doing in my pub?" said the puzzled landlord when asked. "They wanted to look at my wine, that's all. Didn't touch a drop. Just looked. Funny ways you've got on the continent." "Very funny," said the unusually bright decurion, still more thoughtfully. "Very, very funny. I've got it, by Jupiter. Those Gauls have mislaid their barrel, and they're looking for it. All we have to do is follow them, and they'll lead us straight to the magic potion with no extra effort on our part at all, and probably a gong or so and the eternal gratitude of Julius Caesar at the end of it. But we mustn't let them out of our sight. Here," he said, turning to one of his men, "you nip off to Encyclopaedicus Britannicus with a message from me. And the rest of you, come with me. We're following those Gauls." Asterix, Obelix, and Anticlimax were still on their pub crawl. "We've been into nearly all the pubs on the list," said Asterix gloomily. "No luck so far. Well, let's just try this one." And he marched into a pub called the Dog and Ducks. "I've never set eyes on so much wine in my life," said Anticlimax, gamely following him in.
"Drinking only with mine eyes was all very well," agreed Obelix, humming a tune, "but it does get a bit tedious."
He was feeling thirsty.
"Why, yes, as it happens, I did buy a barrel of Gaulish wine," said the landlord of the Dog and Ducks, wiping down his bar. "But I sold it again to the Camulodinum team. They're playing Durovenum tomorrow, you know what?"
"I don't know what," Asterix whispered to his cousin. "What's he on about?"
"It's a game," Anticlimax told him. "We're mad on it in Britain. You play it with a bladder, and 30 Britons divided into teams of 15 men each."
"These Britons," Obelix whispered earnestly to Asterix. "These Britons are crazy. Told you so all along, didn't I?"
"And there's a match on near Londinium tomorrow. Durovenum are playing Camulodinum in the tribal crown," said Anticlimax.
Durovenum was the name for Canterbury in Roman times, by the way, and Camulodinum was the old name for Colchester.
"That's right," said the landlord, "and I'm a Camulodinum supporter. I'm jolly proud to have sold my wine to the Camulodinum team. Up Camulodinum!"
he suddenly bellowed.
"I hope it's good wine, and it helps them to win, what?"
"If it's the barrel I think it is," said Asterix. "They just can't lose. Come on, Obelix. Come on, Anticlimax. We're off to the big match tomorrow." The day of the match between Camulodinum and Durovenum dawned bright and clear. As they set off from Londinium, the 2 Gauls were amazed to see how crowded the road was. Throngs of people were eagerly making their way to the ground. People on foot, people in horse-drawn carts, people carrying placards and banners saying, "Up Camulodinum," or "Support Durovenum." "What a crowd!" said Asterix in surprise.
"Yes, it's quite a popular game, old boy," Anticlimax told him.
"Rather!" And the 3 of them mingled with the throng. "Something that bothers me, though," said Asterix, frowning as they went along the road, "is that the Romans aren't bothering us. It's not natural."
"Perhaps they've had enough of being knocked about,"
Obelix suggested.
"There are people like that, you know. You might not think it, but there are. You knock 'em about a bit, and then they've had enough."
But Asterix was right to be anxious. For little did the 3 friends know that the Romans, commanded by the unusually bright decurion, who had spotted them outside the Angler's Rest, were not far away, in disguise, having exchanged their usual military tunics and armour for a motley collection of civilian clothes, all except for one legionary, who had failed to understand his instructions properly. He was in civilian trousers and tunic all right, but if you looked more closely, his army headgear gave him away. "The decurion said to wear plain clothes, idiot," one of his comrades hissed. "Well, it's only a very plain helmet," said the legionary reasonably. "Now then," said the unusually bright decurion, inspecting his men, "take that helmet off, you fool. Everyone got the idea, by Jupiter? I want you to mingle with the crowd and keep your eyes skinned for anything suspicious." At almost the same time, therefore, the Gauls and the Romans converged on the ground where the big match was being played. Asterix had thought he and his companions would just be able to walk into the Camulogenum's team dressing room and offer to buy their barrel back, but it turned out to be a little more complicated than that. A hefty man guarding the players' entrance pointed to a notice saying "No admittance," and told to go and buy tickets like everyone else. "Then you can see both teams," he pointed out. It hardly seemed worth making a fuss, for the sake of an hour or so Anticlimax and the two Gauls bought their tickets and prepared to watch the game. Inside the ground all was noise and bustle. Refreshments were on sale: hot water, warm beer, mint sauce. Resigning himself to the delay, Asterix decided he might as well enjoy the wait if possible. "Will you explain the rules of this British game, Anticlimax?" he said. "It's really frightfully simple," Anticlimax told him. "You can do whatever you like, within reason, to get the bladder over the other team's goal line. Anything's allowed, except the use of weapons without previous agreement. Ah, here we go. They'll be starting any moment now," he added, as a number of men in tartan trousers and playing bagpipes marched in. "Here come the Caledonian bards," he yelled above the drone and screech of the music. "Good thing Cacophonix can't see this," muttered Asterix to Obelix. "It might give him ideas. He's bad enough on the lyre." "And here come the team's mascots. Camulogenum's sacred goose and Durovenum's hen," said Anticlimax, getting quite worked up with the excitement of it all, as a goose and a hen wearing large bows round their necks were proudly led in. "And now," he cried, "here come the players!" Almost everyone else in the ground was shouting too. The crowd erupted with enthusiasm as 30 huge, beefy men in striped shirts marched in. "Come on, Camulogenum!" they yelled. "Up Durovenum!" The druidical referee blew his horn for kick-off, and the match began. The 30 players charged each other, all making for the oval bladder. They collided. They broke apart again. They dived head first at one another, and got into a frightful tangle which Anticlimax said was called a scrum. When they had finally disentangled themselves again, the Gauls saw one of the Durovenum players jumping methodically up and down on a Camulogenum player's head. Glancing at Obelix, Asterix saw that his friend was jumping up and down too, with enthusiasm. Obelix was thrilled. He thought this game was the next best thing to thumping Romans, and he didn't see why the Britons should keep it to themselves. "We must take this nice game back to Gaul," he said. "Do let's, Asterix. I want to play it too. Wouldn't it be fun to have a match with the Romans?" "Yes, very likely," said Asterix, who had other things on his mind, and was watching the scenes of mayhem on the ground with some concern. "But you know, this is rather worrying. Camulogenum don't seem to be on top. In fact, that Durovenum player is the one on top. He's absolutely flattening the man he's jumping on. And if the Camulogenum team who bought our barrel had drunk any magic potion, they'd be unbeatable." His voice trailed away as the referee, who had been blowing his horn for quite some time, finally managed to make himself heard, and the Durovenum player, who was jumping up and down, instantly stopped what he was doing. "What happens now?" Asterix asked his cousin, as the referee went over to look at the Camulogenum man. "The ref's examining him to see if he's seriously injured, or just faking it," Anticlimax explained. "Faking it?" said Asterix. "Faking it? Why, that beefy great brute was pounding the poor man's head for minutes on end." "It's genuine, all right," said the referee, straightening up. "Let's have a stretcher, please." And a couple of stretcher-bearers hurried on to the pitch and carried the injured Camulogenum player off to the sidelines, where they laid him on the ground.
"That'll be the end of the season for him," said one of the stretcher-bearers, dipping a mug into a barrel that was standing there. A barrel. "Look at that barrel!" cried Asterix all of a sudden. "Look! It's got Dipsomaniac's name on the side, and they've only just broached it. They must have been saving it for refreshments during the game." He was practically jumping up and down with excitement himself, as the two stretcher-bearers took the mug and tipped its contents down the injured player's throat. "Well, now we'll see if it really is the magic potion or not," said Asterix, and he leant forward in suspense. He didn't have to wait long to find out. No sooner had the battered Camuloginum player gulped a few drops of the brew his friends had sloshed into his open mouth than he sat up. For a second or so, he looked as if he didn't know what had hit him. Then he leapt to his feet, bounced up and down several times, thumped his chest, yelled "Yahoo!" at the top of his voice, and charged back onto the pitch with all the speed and power of a Formula One racing chariot. The astonished spectators uttered enthusiastic yells of "Hip-hip-hoorax! Hip-hip-hoorax!" "Hip-hip-hoorax?" asked Asterix, turning to his cousin for translation. "That's his name," said Anticlimax. Hip-hip-hoorax slid to a halt in the middle of the pitch. At the moment, the scoreboard was showing 3 points to Camuloginum and 3 points to Durovenum. 3 all, but not for long. Reaching for the bladder, Hip-hip-hoorax easily fended off the opposing Durovenum players as they dived towards him. They went flying in all directions, and Hip-hip-hoorax raced for the touchline. On his way, he slid to a halt again, this time in front of the Durovenum player, who had been bouncing on him not so long ago. "I say, old chap, was that by any chance you stamping on my peerless features just now, eh, what?" he politely inquired. "Oh, no hard feelings, old boy. Let's not get worked up. It's only a game, you know, and all that sort of thing," suggested the Durovenum player. "So it is, old boy," agreed Hip-hip-hoorax. And next moment the Durovenum man was shooting through the air like an arrow. It was a long, long time before he came down again. Meanwhile, Hip-hip-hoorax charged on and put the bladder over the line. Everyone applauded. "He's scored a try," Anticlimax explained. "Now he's going to try to convert it." Hip-hip-hoorax went back a little way, took a run, and gave the bladder a mighty kick. It sailed away over the crossbar of the curious collection of sticks at the end of the pitch, and vanished from sight. "He's certainly got a kick out of the contents of that barrel. It's the magic potion, all right," said Asterix, with conviction, as the score on the board went up to Camuloginum 8, Durovenum 3, and people looked around for the bladder. Far out at sea, the pirates were sailing quietly along in their new ship, when the lookout man was much surprised to be struck on the head and brought down to deck from the crow's nest by a flying bladder. Where it could have come from was a puzzle the pirates never did solve. Back at the big match, the referee gave up looking for the original bladder and sent for a new one. The short pause had given Asterix time to form a plan of action. "Come on, you two," he told Obelix and Anticlimax. "We'll have to cross the pitch to get our barrel of magic potion back." Obelix was more than willing. He raced happily onto the pitch, clapping his hands with glee. And at this moment, not surprisingly, the unusually bright Roman decurion spotted the Gauls. Even a Roman decurion who was not unusually bright could hardly have failed to spot Obelix. "Off to those men!" he told his legionaries, and they too charged onto the pitch. The druidical referee was getting into a terrible state, trying to straighten things out. "No, no, there's quite enough going on already," he shouted as the Romans came rushing up. "All non-players off the field!" "Out of the way in the name of Rome!" shouted the unusually bright decurion. "That's right, we're legionaries in disguise, we are," said the man in the helmet, who was still wearing it, in defiance of orders. As the scoreboard went up to Camuloginum 57, Durovenum 3, Asterix reached the men on the sidelines who were looking after the barrel of magic potion. "We'd like to buy that barrel," he said. "Sorry, old boy, can't be done," said one of the Camuloginum men, leaning nonchalantly against it. "We need it for the players, don't you know?" "But this is urgent. Let me just explain," Asterix began. However, there was no time for explanations. "Seize that barrel!" cried a voice. Asterix and Anticlimax whirled round. "The Romans!" gasped Asterix. "And where's Obelix?" "Obelix!" he yelled, seeing his friend right in the thick of the game itself. throwing the bladder up and catching it again with great enthusiasm as he evaded all the other players' tackles. "Obelix!" yelled Asterix again. "To the rescue, by two tartis!"
Just coming,
called Obelix regretfully. He hadn't enjoyed himself so much since he came to Britain. A massive line of Gerovanum men formed as he ran forward. "This one won't get through," they muttered grimly to each other. They spoke too soon. Obelix charged right through the massive line of Gerovanum men with the greatest of ease, sending them flying in all directions, reached his friends, seized the barrel, and raced off the pitch with it. "You took your time, didn't you?" said Asterix rather crossly, as he hared along beside Obelix.
well, I had to try for a try.
"Come on, Gaul!" yelled Obelix, balancing the barrel in one hand and still clutching the bladder in the other. "My barrel!" shouted the man from the sidelines. "Our bladder!" shouted all the players. "The Gauls!" shouted the unusually bright Roman decurion, and with one accord they all set off in pursuit of Asterix, Obelix, and Anticlimax, while the referee frantically blew his horn. "Look, you might give them back their bladder so they can get on with the game," suggested Anticlimax. "This isn't cricket, you know, old chap."
I suppose not,
sighed Obelix, reluctantly tossing the bladder behind him. As luck would have it, it fell right into the hands of the unusually bright decurion in disguise. Next moment, 30 large, beefy men were on top of the unusually bright decurion in disguise, hammering him into the ground as they tried to get their own hands on it. And by the time the referee had blown his horn for the end of the match, at which point the score was Camuloginum 804, Gerovanum 3, the Gauls and Anticlimax had made their escape amidst the general confusion. "The Gauls!" panted the unusually bright but now battered decurion in disguise, picking himself up at last. "Where did the Gauls go? Where's that fat man, by Jupiter?" he asked the Gerovanum captain, who was standing next to him. "I don't know," said the Gerovanum captain. "A pity. We'd sign him on like a shot. What a prop forward!" Gnashing his teeth, the battered decurion and his equally battered men made their way out of the ground in pursuit of the Gauls and their potion. When he heard the referee's horn blow, Asterix realized that he hadn't got much of a start on the Romans. "Which way do we go, Anticlimax?" he gasped as they ran. "The river's right ahead," said Anticlimax. "We can escape that way, but we'll have to hurry," he added, looking back over his shoulder. "Those Roman legionaries are after us."
Shall we wait and have some fun with them, Asterix?
asked Obelix hopefully. "No," said his friend. "Quick, let's grab one of those boats." And they were pulling out into midstream in a rowing boat just as the pursuing Romans reached the landing stage on the river bank. This, as it happened, was a welcome sight to the unusually bright decurion. "Do we go after them, decurion?" panted one of his men.
No need,
he chuckled.
Little do they know it, but they're caught like rats in a trap. We thought they might take to the river, and our ships are on the lookout. They'll get 'em in a jiffy.
And sure enough, round the next bend in the river, the little rowing boat found itself confronting a mighty Roman galley, with Centurion Stratocumulus from Aquarium himself on board, standing beside a vast catapult. "Surrender, by Jupiter!" shouted the Centurion. "Never, by two tartis!" went up a defiant cry from the rowing boat. "I don't want to cast the first stone," shouted Stratocumulus insincerely. "But you're making a big mistake. Fire!" he yelled. The first stone fired from the catapult hit the little rowing boat amidships. "Oculus Tori," said the ship's captain with satisfaction. It meant bullseye. He too had been playing darts in British pubs. "Congratulations, Stratocumulus." "Well, we didn't get that magic potion, but we got rid of those Gauls all right," said the Centurion, much pleased. "Right, let's go and tell Governor Encyclopaedicus Britannicus the good news." And the galley moved majestically on, leaving nothing of the little rowing boat behind but a few bits of broken wood. Nothing? Could the Gauls' gallant adventure really have finished at the bottom of the river? No. Next moment, a Gaulish helmet cautiously surfaced. "They're rowing away," said Asterix. "We can get back to the bank now." "But their missile landed right on our barrel of magic potion."
"And the Romans didn't even give us time to have a go at 'em," complained Obelix, sniffing hard. "'Tisn't fair."
very unsporting, old chap, Anticlimax agreed. Obelix hauled himself up on the bank. He was streaming with water, and looked as if he might be about to cry. "Oh, come on, Obelix, don't be so wet," said Asterix briskly. "Never mind the magic potion. You and I can still go and help Anticlimax and his village fight the Romans. And you'll be jolly welcome, old fruit," said Anticlimax. And so, although the Romans had them listed as missing, presumed dead, the three friends set off for that little village in Cantium, which was still holding out against the invaders. What remained of the magic potion, however, had to be left behind, mingling with the waters of the River Thames. And for a good while afterwards, anglers fishing that stretch of the river were to have some distinctly fishy experiences, finding that even the smallest minnows had the strength to pull them right into the drink, to the huge amusement of their friends making humorous comments up on the bank. The only consolation was that if you had drunk any of the drink when you fell into it, once you climbed out again, you were easily able to silence your witty companions with the merest tap of your little finger. A few days after the big match and the loss of the magic potion, our friends arrived in Anticlimax's village, to be welcomed warmly by Chief My Kingdom for an Os and his allies, over-optimistics and mechanics. "Did you manage to get through the enemy lines fairly easily?" asked the chief. "Yes," said Asterix. "The Romans seemed very sure of themselves. We were only challenged by one patrol." "Not that I really felt like a bit of fun," said Obelix mournfully, even though he was carrying yet another large stack of Roman helmets. Chief My Kingdom for an Os fully understood the reason for Obelix's gloom when he heard the Gaul's sad news. "You've lost the magic potion," he said in dismay. "Then we're done for. When the Romans hear, they'll attack, eh, what?" "Do not fuss, man," said Mechanics helpfully. "We'll die with our boots on." "Sure and begorra we will," agreed over-optimistics. And then suddenly Asterix had a brainwave. "We're not beaten yet, by two tarties," he said, taking something out of his pocket. "Look at these herbs. I'd almost forgotten them. I brought them all the way from home. We can use them to make the magic potion. Bring me a cauldron of hot water." "I say we are saved. Very decent of you, old chap," said the chief. "Rather," said his men enthusiastically. "Jolly good show, what?" Obelix, however, was puzzled. "You don't really know how to make the magic potion, do you, Asterix?" he whispered. "No," Asterix whispered back. "Only our druid knows the secret of the recipe. But when we left home, Getafix gave me these herbs which happened to be lying on the table in his house. They may have qualities we don't know about. Anyway, they'll encourage our British friends to feel brave enough to fight the Romans." In a minute, the cauldron of hot water arrived. "Oh, I say, I'm most frightfully glad you could make the magic potion, old fruit, don't you know?" My Kingdom for an Os told Asterix once again. "Will it take long?" "No," said Asterix, sprinkling in the herbs. "There, it's ready. As simple as one of our own British recipes," said Chief My Kingdom for an Os, approvingly, beckoning his warriors over. "Come on, men, come and have some potion." The British warriors queued up for it with their hot water cups, looking suspiciously at the cauldron. "I don't trust this fancy Gaulish cooking," they muttered. "No garlic in that magic potion, is there? Can we have a drop of milk in it?"
"That proves it," Obelix told Asterix. "Those Britons are most definitely crazy."
"Jolly good," said My Kingdom for an Os, finishing his cup. "This hot water certainly refreshes the parts other hot water can't reach. And now to sit back and wait for the Romans to attack." There was not so very long to wait. For if Asterix's trick had given the British fresh courage, Roman morale was high too. A messenger came from Londinium to the general commanding the main Roman forces in Britain. He was encamped not far from the little rebel village. "Aye, General," said the messenger, saluting smartly. "Governor Encyclopaedicus Britannicus has sent me to tell you that the magic potion and its Gaulish escort are at the bottom of the river." "Are they, though?" cried the general gleefully. "Splendid, splendid! Then this is the moment to attack the village, by Jupiter! Everybody fall in! Sound the trumpets!" In no time at all the trumpets were sounding, and and the general was pacing up and down addressing his men, who were drawn up in impressive battle formation. "Centurions, decurions, other ranks, lend me your ears," he began. "The enemy have lost their magic potion and their Gaulish allies at one fell swoop. It's perfectly safe to attack them now, so imitate the action of the Tiber. On, you noblest Romans! Attack!" he yelled, and here, as he was a man of deeds and not of words, he ran out of quotations and marched boldly forward with his sword drawn. His men were about to follow him, when somebody else started addressing them too. Somebody with a smallish head in a smallish Gaulish helmet, which had suddenly popped up above the fence surrounding the village. "Hi there, legionaries!" shouted Asterix cheerfully. "We just thought we'd let you know we're here, and so is the magic potion, but don't let it bother you. There's still time to surrender." The shock to the Roman legionaries was considerable. They stopped charging ahead after their general, and clustered round in a circle, discussing this new and dangerous situation. "I know who that is," said one man. "I was stationed at Aquarium, I was. That's Asterix, that is." "And if Asterix is there," agreed another man, "his best friend Obelix can't be far away." "Which Obelix?" asked a third soldier in alarm. "Not the mad one. Only one Obelix, isn't there?" said his friend gloomily. "And they've been feeding the Britons magic potion," said someone else. "When you've quite finished," said the exasperated general, who by now had discovered that no one was following him, and had thus been obliged to turn back. "When you've quite finished your cosy chat, perhaps you would kindly obey orders and attack." "Come on then, attack," agreed the mocking voice from the village fence. "Do as the man says." A larger figure popped up beside the first one. "What's happened to your Roman discipline, by two Tartus?" inquired Obelix. He was raring to go. "Attack, can't you?" "Shall we start it for 'em, Asterix?" asked my kingdom for an os. "Let's do that, chief," said Asterix. And with a tremendous surge, and war cries of "Yikes! How's that? Tally-ho!" and all that sort of thing, eh, what? The Britons and their guests burst out through the village gates, with Obelix in the lead, pushing to get at the Romans before anyone else. "Obelix, stop shoving," said Asterix. "You're not at home now, you know. Let the others have a go at the Romans first." "Certainly not. Visitors first," said Obelix. "That's only polite." The Roman legionaries were shaking in their Roman sandals, and with good reason. The battle was short and very sharp. Terrified as much by the reputation of the Gauls and their magic potion as by anything that was actually happening, the Romans turned and ran for it. Their impressive battle formation turned into an impressive display of that interesting military manoeuvre, the retreat in disorder. "They're running away!" roared my kingdom from Os triumphantly. "Victory!" shouted Anticlimax. The other Britons joined the cheering too. "What have you got that Roman tucked under your arm for, Obelix?" asked Asterix severely.
"Well, I only thought I could finish him off later in peace and quiet," said Obelix.
"Oh, no, you don't," said Asterix. "Put him down."
"We come all the way to Britain, specially to thump Romans," grumbled Obelix, "and still we don't get to have any fun with them."
But he did as Asterix said. "Thank you very much, Asterix," said the chief, when the Romans had all been seen off and were out of sight. "Thanks to your help, we have defeated our enemies. I intend to pursue them and liberate the whole of Britain." Said Asterix. Well, it wasn't genuine magic potion I gave you, you know." "I guessed as much," chuckled the chief. "But your brew gave my warriors courage, so what's the difference? Send us some more of those herbs when you get back to Gaul, will you? I'll make the potion you brewed with them our national drink." "Right," said Asterix. "Well, time we were going. Goodbye, cousin Anticlimax. We'll be off home to Gaul now that our mission is accomplished." "Oh, I say, don't go just yet," protested Anticlimax. "We'd like to hold a feast in your honour, to show our gratitude. There'll be boiled boar," he said enticingly. "Boiled beef,
"Sorry, but we're in a hurry," said Obelix, interrupting. "Come on, Asterix."
"Well, jolly nice having you chaps here, what?" said Anticlimax, shaking hands with the Gauls, and so they parted. Asterix was keen to get home to Gaul, too. In fact, he told Obelix when they were out at sea in the little jolly boat, I'm so keen to be back in our own village, I suggest we don't even stop if we meet pirates this time.
Said Obelix doubtfully. Don't you think that might hurt their feelings?
And at that very moment, the lookout man up in the crow's nest of the pirates' new ship was calling out, "Little jolly boat to starboard, Captain!"
This is a brand new ship, said the pirate captain cautiously. I don't want to be reckless. Let's just see who's on board this little boat before we do anything rash. No, he yelled as they came closer. It's them again. It's those Gauls again. Let's get out of here. Turn and flee. Full speed ahead.
The pirate ship turned and fled, full speed ahead.
I'm happy, gloated the captain a little later. So happy. I've diddled the Gauls this time. I was faster than they were. They didn't sink me.
There was a sudden nasty crunch somewhere down below.
I may have run aground, said the captain,
a little later still, reclining on the shore.
I'll admit that. I may have run aground. But they didn't sink me, did they?
And you didn't want to be reckless either, agreed the lookout man in the crow's nest, viewing what he could of the wrecked vessel from the crazy angle at which the mainmast was now tilted. As for Asterix and Obelix, they were welcomed home to their own village, and as usual a great banquet was held to celebrate their return. As usual, too, Cacophonix the bard was prevented from performing his celebratory ode, so there was nothing to spoil anyone's fun. Asterix told the full, exciting tale of their visit to ancient Britain, and Obelix was reunited with two dear old friends, his faithful hound Dogmatix, and roast boar. All the roast boar he could eat, which came to a lot of roast boar, and when even he could eat no more, he started trying to teach the villagers the delightful game he had learned to play in Britain. There was just one question Asterix still had to ask, and when he had the chance of a quiet word with Getafix, he asked it. "Those herbs I picked up at your house before I left for Britain, Getafix," he said. "The Britons are planning to make the stuff I brewed from them their national drink. Do you know any more about 'em yet?" "Yes, as a matter of fact, I do," said Getafix. "The traveller from that antique land passed this way again. He told me they came from a plant that grows in distant eastern lands, and you can use this plant to brew a cup that cheers, but not inebriates." "And what's it called?" asked Asterix. "Tea," said the Druid.